This is the Grief Talk Podcast with Vaughn Solis, helping you heal after loss and life's hardest hits. My guest today is Vickie Menendez. Vickie is a transformational guide, speaker, and the author of Crystal's Butterfly Effect. Vickie's journey began with the stillbirth of her daughter in 1980, quietly opening the door to her spiritual path. The loss of her son Wesley in 2017, and then tragically losing two more children just 12 days apart in 2023, gave Vickie full awareness and clarity of her life's mission, which was to help others walk through loss and return to life with purpose and grace. With over 35 years in self-care and holistic wellness, Vickie now supports others through one-on-one soul guidance, healing communities, and experiential workshops to gently guide her clients to feel again and begin to reimagine their lives with meaning as part of her Learning to Live Again movement. So Vickie, welcome to the Grief Talk Podcast. I am honored to have you here. And audience, Vickie and I had a little conversation before I hit the record button, so we do have a lot of things in common. What we don't have in common is the loss of multiple children, but almost everything else, Vickie, I just feel like I told you, we're kindred spirits, soul sisters in the sense of choosing these tough experiences, child loss, worst experience people can imagine. And I just know you will have heard that throughout your many years of being a bereaved mom. So today, audience, I'm going to let you, Vickie, as we talked, just talk about what you really want to share with my audience. We have a growing audience on this podcast because, as I've said many times, there's still no directory on any of the podcast platforms for grief and bereavement. So you have to fit it into education and inspiration and religion, spiritual. Those are my three categories. So I would like to see, before I give up on this, I would like to see that change so people can go right in and learn from bereaved parents of whom I've had on my podcast, each with their own message, but no one as stunning in their story as you, Vickie. So if you just want to pop in and say a quick hello to my audience, I will get you started with your first question right after that.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Vaughn. I'm so happy to be here to talk about my experience. I talk about what has happened to me over a lifetime to hopefully inspire other people that there is healing. There is a way to healing. There's no destination healed. There is no destination where you can say, okay, now I'm done, I'm healed, because that pain and that loss will always be with you. It's just what kind of definition do we give it? How do we dance with the emotions that rise up from time to time? Because some days we're really great and some days we can be deep in grief. So sometimes we feel like we're taking a step back, but I'm sure that we'll get into this a little bit further as we get in conversation. And that's something that I'll explain a little bit later. But you are far from taking a step back when you do have those times where you feel like you've gone back into the cocoon, to do more work.
Yeah. So audience, stay with me if you are a bereaved parent for sure, mom or dad, want to learn more about supporting a bereaved parent. As I said to Vickie prior to recording, I have only ever spoken in my 20 years as a bereaved mom due to the loss of my daughter to suicide in 2005. And it was actually at a support group, the Compassionate Friends function. And she had lost two children. And back then, that was about, basically 19, 20 years ago. And back then I was like, oh my goodness. But what that did was set me on a path immediately to really understand in person, you can lose more than one child. Holy crap. And, it really did always put me sort of on guard with my surviving son, and something I still have a little trouble with, but I found tools to manage that. Basically largely activate the Find Me on the iPhone, which at 33 he is graciously allowed me to do. I can't tell you how freeing that has been for me to know he's safe, he's still okay, and I hope that doesn't last till the end of my life, but if it does, it does. So like you said, Vickie, we're going to jump into it. We are going to shape this conversation, folks, watching or listening to this, in terms of always remembering healing is possible. Vickie and I have done that. Your more recent losses, as I'll remind folks, but I'll let you tell it, have been as really recently as 2023, where you did lose 2 adult children, and prior to that, 2017, another adult son, a younger adult son, and then 1980 when you had a stillborn daughter, who you believe reincarnated as one of your children, if you want to even talk about that, because I think that's so cool, and some people might be comforted by that. And so I just want to ask you to jump in, Vickie, wherever you want to start. And then we're going to weave in the healing and the inspiration in whatever way you want to, because I also know you're a Soma level 3 instructor and a map coach, is it? You do mapping? Again, folks, Vickie is the author of a more recently released book,
Crystal's Butterfly Effect.
Okay, so Vickie, having explained all that, why don't you just jump in where you feel comfortable with your story? And as mentioned, we will weave in, as we're called to, and you're called to, the healing bits, the inspirational hope bits, because it's just the two are so entwined. So I'll turn it over to you wherever you'd like to start.
Well, I mean, the first loss, if we go way back to 1980, losing a stillborn at 20, I wasn't very far along with my awareness or consciousness level at that point, and didn't really know how to process something like that. And so it was years, even after having all 3 of the other children that passed, there was always that fear around them being born, and all of that was there was the excitement about being pregnant, but also the fear about something happening during birth or something like that. Uh, and it was probably a good 5 years before I could really talk about Leslie. And because I went into the doctor one day, he couldn't find a heartbeat. So I went into the hospital knowing that she wasn't coming home with me. And I held her. I just traced every inch of her body, and especially like her face, held her hand. I think I saw her whole life flash before my eyes in just a matter of minutes. And so I left the hospital with a lock of her hair and her footprint. And that was it. And years later, I was talking to someone. I really started getting into spirituality and all of that kind of thing. And I was talking to this woman one day, and she said that I asked her, I said, could her soul come back around and come right back in and be within Crystal? And she said, yes, absolutely. That's a possibility. And the reason why, and lately when I started writing the book, I realized what a thread there was between the 2 of them, because the cord got wrapped around Leslie's neck and it choked her. And my daughter had asthma her whole life, which was a problem with breathing. So, I always felt like that they were one soul, that she just came right back around. She was meant to be here, but she just wasn't meant to be here right then, that there was something there for me to learn, something for me to gain from that. And yeah,
that was also in my family. That happened to one of my siblings, and same exact identical. So I just want to say a nod to those who might be watching this that have had a stillborn, child at due date, and or later. In my in-laws' case, my brother and his wife, it was 2 weeks. The baby was 2 weeks late. It's just traumatic. They had to have a funeral.
I don't know, did you have to have a funeral for Leslie? And so I'm just saying this episode is not about that, but it could be an episode all on its own for those who may be hosting a podcast or something that, dedicate grief to this, because I don't know. Do they talk about it a lot in the circles you sort of are in, Vickie?
No, I mean, stillbirth, I definitely think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done around that, especially if you go in and you have other children. And because for me, I realized only 5 years ago that that the losing her at that time changed how I interacted with everybody in my life.
Oh.
It wasn't that I didn't love them, it was that I loved at a distance. I was always had that fear, like, intertwined with it, and I I wish that I'd known what I knew now, but that wasn't my path, like, I was supposed to learn it along the way, and
Yeah.
but I think there's a lot of work that you can do around that before you go in to have other children so that you make sure that you're not imprinting other relationships with that experience.
Okay, huge lesson, what you just said right there, Vickie. Anyone listening to or watching this episode, huge what you just said. Do the work if you can. And a lot of people, call the next child today a rainbow baby. And a lot of that, I think, might be from miscarriage, but also, possibly from stillbirth. It's not something I sure see in the media a lot. And there are probably, I know that there in Canada are dedicated support groups to that. And they are not the same as support groups for losing adult children or older children, or we even have support groups whether your child died in a hospital or suicide. Two very different things. And my experience has always been, and I think it remains, very limited support available in Canada. There is support and it's growing, but it's still not what we need in the various areas of loss. So I just wanted to give a nod to that because that was your first child lost and set the foundation. I'm just confirming with you for a more in-depth look at your life. Would you say at this point and before or after one or more of your remaining children from that marriage union, because you do have a wonderful surviving son, and we want to give a nod to that you do, just like me, have a surviving son, and I know we're both very grateful for our boys. Um, in more ways than one, as tech experts and other things. But no, would you say your lessons began in what time frame after losing Leslie?
Well, that made me curious about spirituality and that kind of thing, and why. I always felt like, what did I do? Why did I deserve this? And at the time, I had no idea about contracts, or I didn't have that enlightenment yet, and that came after Wesley in 2017. But no, it never goes away. I mean, that was 45 years ago in 1980, and I still get choked up when I talk about her at times because that's something that I don't think mothers can ever forget. Because there is like that, like I was saying earlier, their life kind of flashes before your eyes. I had a baby book that had a lock of hair and her footprint, and that is it. There was no first teeth at 1, or she walked at 9 months, or there was none of those things that you typically write down in these books. No pictures in there, nothing to monitor her growth or anything, because there was nothing after that day.
Yeah, and I'm pausing here. Because I think what you're talking about is so important, because you had to have the funeral, as did my family have to have the funeral for, this was a boy. And then, some people might just say, well, now just get over it. You can have more kids, or you do have more children, and somehow you have to integrate that grief that you don't even understand at 20 years old, my God, with having more children. And so for people that might be tuning into this and maybe have had the same experience and they're not allowed to talk about it, or they feel they can't talk about it because it wasn't important enough. I don't know. I don't know how they measure grief, and certainly how they measure it in terms of child loss. So what would you want to say to moms looking back? Try and deal with that and come to terms with that moving forward to have more children.
I think that, like I was saying earlier, I was standing at the gravesite and my husband said, "Oh, you could have other ones, like, but it's nothing."
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really hard to talk to people about it when they think, well, they never lived, like if that there's just not as much emphasis put on the loss, like we still a loss, and it's a big loss.
Yeah, for sure. So, I'll leave this part of our talk with just recognizing and honoring that these losses are very important, and more work needs to be done in this area, certainly in your country, the US, and certainly in Canada, and probably around the world. And so we're honoring all those babes that came, almost made it, and I believed, tell me what you think, that the soul decides, like, okay, years ago, I read years and years and years ago that we can consider life, regardless of biology, in the spiritual sense, when soul enters the body. And if they are born stillborn or die SIDS or, something like this, that in the spiritual kind of teachings, it would be that the soul has vacated the body and has decided that this wasn't a good fit for them and they're going to come back, which is a beautiful segue into what you believe about Leslie becoming at least part of Crystal, if not coming back as Crystal.
Yeah, I really think, and years later, I've really put the two together, but, the way Leslie went out before getting wrapped around your neck and taking her breath away, just, it was like that connection with my daughter, with Crystal having asthma her whole life, having only if her breath. So, and what I treated to that conclusion as I was writing the book. I was like, oh wow, there's another, I was writing my chapter on synchronicities. And that's what I kind of put that two together. Like I'd been thinking about her soul coming back into Crystal. And that gave me a lot of solace for many years. Like I felt like I have her.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I get that.
It helped a lot because I thought, I didn't feel like I was listening, that she did come back through in Crystal.
Yeah.
Well, I really put the two together about the breath until I started writing the book.
So let's move into Vickie, what you want to share about. I note in your book you didn't talk, at least I didn't pick up that you talked a lot about Wesley's passing in 2017. And if I'm correct, that was a drug overdose and you found him. And I just want to acknowledge that again, the next time you lost a child was 2017. So you got 1980, 2017. And so I just want to pay respect and homage to Wesley. You do talk about him as a brilliant artist, and I appreciate that. My daughter was very gifted as well, and sometimes I think that these children, just the world can be too much for them. And the other thing I want to say as a shout out, and from the suicide things, I just sadly read yesterday that in my province of British Columbia, the suicide rates for age 9 to 25 has not diminished in the last few years, and they recognize there are no supports, and that is probably true across the country and probably true elsewhere around the globe, because when you study those statistics, they don't change much around the globe. Anyway, so just a nod to
From South.
yeah, the youngest I've heard that has gone is at 10.
And so, and so whatever way our children go, I just want to make the point here that whatever way our children go, most of us as bereaved parents don't sit there and go, well, how did your kid die? We don't. We just all we understand the pain of that loss. And so, but sometimes we need answers, and when it's drug overdose and things like that, and we can feel responsible. When it's medical, I don't know, maybe you still feel responsible, which we're going to get into a little bit, but in those cases, so if it's drug overdose, if it is a suicide, if it's something that you felt that you did really poorly as a parent, I just want to know, Vickie, if in what the impact of Wesley and then the 7 years until your next big lessons, what were you learning in that period from Wesley's passing?
After Wesley passed, I think, although I had been through 30 years of Tony Robbins, like that kind of learning. But what I learned after Wesley was how to really process the emotions. And because I still, after him, my dad died, the year after him in 2018. And I realized that I thought I was handling it because I thought, oh, you just get up and you just keep moving forward. But I wasn't really honoring the emotions that I have and really embracing them. And that's one thing I learned after I started my healing journey. Like Wesley's contract was, I think it's threefold. He left a piece of art for me in his apartment. Mm-hmm. And that piece of art had his entire life on the one piece of art. Well, the side was all of the things that we wanted. The other side was all of the things that was only giving out to the dark, to the dark side.
Yeah, I saw that picture. I just want to say I went to your website and looked at it because it's on your website.
I help it. Yeah. And the book is a little artsy because it's so small. But there was a message there, and it was to both the parents of addicts and to the addicts. And parents of addicts, there's more to the child than the drug. And sometimes we think that's all they think about. But in that piece of art, I could tell that he still had hopes and journeys. And he still wanted that happy family. He wanted that baby. He wanted, to be successful in love. And sometimes they don't talk about it because they're afraid of being judged. Because if we're in the middle of an addiction, who's going to believe that one? They don't believe it. They have those feelings, those wants and desires, but even they have doubts that they can get out of it where they are in the addiction. And then the parents have given up on, as some parents really, it's really difficult to watch your child go through that. And so some people think, oh, tough love, just disconnect. And we're all energetic beings.
Yeah.
So if our parents have given up on us, they feel that. A child will feel that, and then they give up on themselves. Like, why did it stop? Because if my parents are giving up on you, and that's something that they feel energetically. And after looking at that piece of art, I was like, wow, I'm not giving up on Wesley. But you wonder, like, until I went into my healing journey and learned all these new tools around processing grief and processing emotions and that kind of thing, there was always that thought, what I found this, I found that, what ifs does absolutely nothing for your present situation because they're gone. And there's absolutely nothing you can do about that.
Did you I just have to ask, did you feel like you had done a bad job with Wesley and you resolved that, in the following years past, post his transition? Or that you'd let him down?
Well, I probably felt like that until I started on my healing journey, and there was 2 things that I did that brought me into
the contacts and how we cross paths with people.
Yeah.
There for a long time, I was like, what could I have done differently and questioning, I felt like I did as much as I could do to connect with him.
Yeah.
Just connected with a lot of people in his fame.
Yeah.
And like you were saying earlier, I think artists are they they work on such a different plane altogether with their how they feel, how their mind works, and that that I think sometimes they do have a hard time living on Earth's plane. Like they're just the focus of the place. But I read Radical Forgiveness.
Yeah.
On the 28 Days of Gratitude. Yeah. Those days changed my whole perception about life, death, showing gratitude for the little things. We think we show gratitude for a lot of things, but when you get into a gratitude challenge, you have to come up with 10 new gratitudes every day. You start showing gratitude for the most minute things. We don't show gratitude for that water tap turning on every time we turn the handle, or having a hot shower, or food in your refrigerator, or even having a stove. But those just seem like things, everyday things that everybody has, right? But doing the gratitude challenge and you reading, especially reading Radical Forgiveness by Colin Tipping, changed my whole perception on the people that cross our paths. We tend to see and be victim with sometimes when people do things, say things to us that that trigger us in some book. And after reading that book, I realized that the triggers are our opportunities to heal, whether it's things from this lifetime or maybe generational trauma that you've brought in with us.
Mm-hmm. Oh, one thing I want to just say about the gratitude piece is, and what I teach in my work is that if you can't feel it, you can't feel it. Don't try and force yourself. It ain't going to work. You wait until that nudging, and it's a very emotional sort of shift that where you can start to truly, the gratitude you're talking about, truly feel it. They might as well call it radical gratitude and radical forgiveness. It's sort of the same, where it's it's a big ask to feel gratitude when you're a bereaved parent. Pretty big ask. And I mean, there's things that, you're surviving children, of course, but there's, you feel gratitude for that, your family, for this, that, and the other thing. But a real gratitude for me, and the shift was when I could feel gratitude for what I learned from the loss. That was a big shift for me. And that is an internal thing where you start to get your lessons and things like that, all of which I know you have gone through and written about in your beautiful book. So you were on your journey and dove into self-discovery, healing from the loss of Wesley. And then your dad, and that must have had an impact. I also lost my parents, both my parents within my daddy 15 months after my daughter, and then my mom a shock death in 2010, so 5 years later. And so there was a lot of loss, and her biological father died, I think it was 2011. So there was a lot of loss around that. Is there anything you want to, giving a nod to your dad also, that you want to talk about with how that also played into your search, your life search for lessons and healing?
The shock of finding Wesley when he was not in very good state. Like, he was already decomposing by the time I found him. Which is a sight that you can't unsee. You can't unsee your child. And, my first thought was he's alone here all this time. But then, after and then, losing my dad a year later, it really kind of pushed me over the edge. And I knew that I just felt so heady. I was looking at some old pictures of myself, and or not so old, like at the time they were fairly recent, and I was smiling, but there was pain all written all over my face, and I could see it at that time. I remember just adding pain from head to toe, like I was having aches and pains, and my joints hurt, and all those things in the company grief. And people don't realize that that's part of the grieving process. The emotions just get stored and they
Yep.
lodge in your tissues, your organs. And you learn how to deal with those emotions, how to process that. Then that manifests in cancer, manifests in depression, into, and you go to the doctor and they're, oh, well, you have rheumatoid arthritis, and they're going to give you all of this medication for it. When sometimes it's just emotional trapping it's that we have in our bodies. If you think about it, okay, when my son died, I was 58. I can carry Leslie around with me for all of those years, even though I thought that her soul came back. There's still that element of loss that I still carry around with me. With her. And then, with my dad right after that, it calmed down to enough that I felt so heavy and so weighted down that that was part of this contact with me, was to nudge me into my healing. Because there is no way I would be sitting here talking to you back today had I not went through that couple of years of really working hard on learning how to process emotions, how to just to get back to a state of joy again before the 2 kids pass, because they pass 12 days apart. I don't know if
I do know that. I want to let you tell your story. So the point I want to make for the audience is that if you're a bereaved parent, our journeys evolve. I was thinking about you, Vickie, okay, this morning. And our journeys evolve differently and uniquely. And sometimes we can think we need to be in a place where other people are, and we don't. We can't, because whatever we believe, and even if we believe the same things, like you and I have similar beliefs in that our losses are contracts, soul contracts, and there are lessons from it. And then in both our cases, we're turning it around to be authors and do inspirational work and help others and so on and so forth. But we both come from more of a metaphysical, spiritual foundation. How we got there doesn't matter, what we're there, but still what you're doing, what I'm doing are completely different. And I also believe that our sort of, how do I want to say this? Fulfilling that contract from our end, okay, I think that can evolve too. And I was telling you, and I will say it as a shout out in case anyone else is going through this, but just to give you hope and inspiration, or even just some fun, is that I'm actually moving more into understanding afterlife and blending timelines from previous incarnations and living them, where my daughter is able to give me physical signs of her presence right here. So that was a shift that happened to me a year ago and helped me kind of refine my purpose, which is probably to do something to do with timeline healing. I'm working with someone in that area, and also to understand afterlife very differently. Because when you get signs, and Vickie, I know you get signs, and we're going to turn to Crystal in your 48-day vigil, and there were some major shifts for you going on there. And so you've been blessed with signs of afterlife, and also your grandchildren, and when your one grandson specifically, right? But each of Crystal's children feel her presence. And so I would like to talk a little bit about that. but we can still question those signs. And Vickie, I want to get your thoughts on it, on this, and then to share what your 48, what impacted you the most. You write so beautifully about your vigil beside Crystal. So whatever, if you, however much you want to share about what led Crystal to be in hospital, to have that vigil, your spiritual, I don't know if you want to call it a further awakening, holy smoly, understanding the purpose, wow, the contract, and your thoughts on afterlife.
Um, well, I really feel like that. Crystal, I have conversations about spirituality, and they were so connected. Her children, her husband, all connected on a different level. And I think that's the reason why she visited them in so many different ways. I mean, you remember about the little helicopter plane just coming to life in their cabin. And
It was a drone, right? Was it a little drone? Yeah.
we were probably, and there were loads sitting there on the table, and they're all looking at it like, okay.
And it starts flying around the cabin, right?
Yes, yes. And then one day it was in the middle of the night, it's dark, they could hear things like moving around like somebody's tripping over stuff, and then they heard heels. And a friend of my daughter's actually had lost 2 children, and Crystal was like her best friend. And she took her life about a month after Crystal passed. And they felt like they could hear them, and they felt like they were together. And they were there, just letting them know that they're there. But in the hospital, I walked into the hospital with a totally different understanding of why I was there. Now, if this had happened a few years before that, I would have had the awareness, the consciousness level that I had at that point, because I would have gone through that feeling, Joe. I did not had that under my belt. I might have gone in and just from judging of, why did you take her to the hospital? Why? And, I would have been a victim in it or whatever. And I walked into the hospital room just wanting to create a sacred space for her. Because this was all about Crystal. This was all about what she was going through and the work that I knew that she's still doing from the hospital bed. She was alma that whole time. He never communicated like working that way.
Yeah. I just want to pop in, so to give context, so she had a medical emergency and put off going to the hospital. And was this not like on Christmas Eve day in 2022? And so she prolonged for whatever reason, and you write about it in your book, going to the hospital. And by the time she got to the hospital, what I wasn't clear about, was she in a coma by the time she got to the hospital, or did they put her in a medical coma?
She went into cardiac arrest.
Cardiac arrest.
Like hospital. And then they were able to bring her back. But by then she'd been under for so long that she was having seizures and all of that. And that's the reason why they cleared me in induced coma, because she was having lots of seizures and stuff, one right up with the other. And so we thought with time that, I only study the cases where the patients do that fully healed. Where the doctors were saying they would never walk again, talk again, they would never wake up again, and they did. Those are the cases that I look at. I didn't look at the cases where people died. I want to keep the energy in a positive note. Like anything is possible, right?
So here's a question. Vickie. So your city, it was 48 days, right? A 48-day vigil. And other family, her hubby came in and stuff, but you did not leave her side except maybe to rest a little bit or whatever. So I commend you. And as I told you before we started this recording, which by the way feels like a month ago now, But anyway, that, it was so poignant. It did make me, have tears and, want to cry, because you bring the reader like right there with you, and you write so beautifully, and so poignantly. But here's a question for you. Were you in that time that, of course you want her to wake up and be Crystal? At the same time, with your spiritual practice and the healing, that had taken place for you, and how you may have come to understand Wesley's passing at this point, 7 years later, were you able to, accept that it was her journey, and if she was going to let go, man, she was going to let go and go?
Absolutely. Now, I always had the hope, of course, that she would defy all odds. But I also knew that at some point, and it was their story that I have to tell you, because this is going to kind of help bring everything together, I think. But after 30 days, the doctors were like, "You need to make procedure with this pen." And because she had asked for 30 days. Yeah, just crazy. Her and her husband was watching a movie or something, and somebody was in the hospital or whatever, and they were talking about that very subject. How much time would you want me to give you if you were like plugged up to electrical equipment and you needed that to live? And say, I would want 30 days. So when the 30 days came by, she we'd have to decide, and of course the insurance was all over us because she was in ZCU for 30 days. So that was now mounting up, and they just didn't see her being able to get me there. So I was went home because I knew that I didn't want to leave her side until we were all there. To see it pass. And so I went back. I was going back to get some clothes. I was in the car. I was talking to my husband on the phone, and he's like, "I don't want you to be there when she dies. I just think that's going to be too much for you to handle." And I said, "Where else would you be, except Bob Versailles?" I said, so when I got off the phone with him, I was crying, and I was on my way to the hotel to get my clothes. And all of a sudden, I feel this energy just come through my back and out the front of my body like this. Whoosh, like all of a sudden, it actually moved my body, and I felt like I was vibrating from head to toe. And for just a moment, I felt the sadness. And then all of a sudden, I was laughing. I'm like, how can I be laughing right now? And then I realized that it's Crystal, her energy. Yeah, she was telling me, she said, "Mom, I'm more than okay."
Yeah.
That she was free, that she was just, that she was fine, and that she was better than okay. And
Yeah, because for the audience, again, she did have some medical challenges in life and some limitations, right? And they had severely, I mean, again, you write about this, but they had impacted her in a way that, I don't know if it was frustrating for her, but it wasn't like life wasn't like she was struggling a little bit with that, right?
what? She had her hips, she had these problems with both hips. And by 41, she had had 2 hip replacements. Wow. Just with her second hip replacement, just be months before that. And we had all of these plans, things that we were going to do. She, was barely able to get around for years. And we had all of these plans, hiking, to do this and that. And now she had her hips back, and it's just, it was so sad just to see what took place. And, like when we talked earlier that day, and I thought everything was fine. I had no idea that she'd had trouble breathing all day. She didn't tell me that. And but a part of me, and I wrote this in the book, part of me thinks that her soul kind of held her back because her soul knew that this was on. They knew that contact is coming to an end.
Yeah.
That she was just, for some reason, pulling back to go to the hospital because she'd been in the hospital hundreds of times with her asthma.
Do you think that no, did you, in looking back, and I know it's pretty fresh, February 2023, but the emergency that actually that, so I would believe that, so that's the emergency she created as part of her contract, and everything unfolded exactly the way it was meant to, and you were supposed to sit there for your 48 days or however many days it would be for someone. Like, this is how, and I know this is how I my spiritual practice has been taught to me over the decades. Same with you. Same with you. And so did she, like, in looking back, I could see that my daughter, she said her goodbyes to us. And even though it was a suicide, there were signs looking back. She was ready to leave the planet. And then after she died, she had created through photography, but it was digital, the most beautiful spiritual art that told me she knew a whole lot more than she ever let on. Probably more than me, which is why she's my teacher. Did Crystal ever give you those signs that she was getting ready to leave the planet? Or I know you lived in different places, so it might have been harder, but do you think they were there? Like, I guess the real question I'm asking, kids or not, our kids or not, do you think we know when our time is coming to leave the planet? Do you think that's at least possible?
It could be possible, and I think it really depends on just how, where your awareness level, level is.
Yeah.
She, is a few thousand miles away from me, so there was a little bit of a disconnect there, even though, as mothers, we have like this resonance with our children.
Yeah.
So on a cellular level, we keep it, and mitochondria is shared. All these things are shared, and it can be, their presence in our body can be there for decades.
I know.
Acting as the norm.
I know.
So I feel like as others that we should know that they may not be there physically, but they are with us. They are us.
Yeah.
Why energetically, if we're all one?
Oh, for sure.
It's just the physical body that we're missing, but they are still within us.
Yeah.
And
so did you worry about her leaving the planet early? Like, was there any signs even for you? Because I always worried about my daughter. I really did. And I didn't look at it. Listen, at the time, she only lived to 22. So I didn't look at it like, I am so worried she's going to take her life. No, but there was something for years and years and years that I don't feel with my son. That's a different worry. This one was a gnawing. This was an inner heaviness, a real grief within me in looking back and not understanding what grief really was. Kind of knowing, like, I couldn't picture her future after a certain age, like I just, and so I think at an innate, and the day before she died, I have my own story in that, in my own book, Divine Healing, but it was so, like, I was so afraid for her. I think I was more afraid for me because I really think I knew she was going. Did you ever have that fear about Crystal?
Well, I knew that she was really miserable with all of the pain that she was going through.
Yeah.
And I guess if I had any fear, it would just be of her wanting to take her life like that. Because I couldn't imagine having the level of pain that she had on a daily basis for years. Because some days I'll have pain, and I went through years where I had like head to toe pain. And it was horrible. And hers, all in her hips and not really being able to move. I mean, she's bone to bone. And that is like one of the hardest and the worst pains that you can experience. And I just, I felt so helpless because no matter, I just felt like there was nothing I could do above.
Do you believe she's your teacher, though, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, our full grade pick us. We don't pick our children. Our children pick us.
I agree.
They have a certain path that they were supposed to walk, and I, as their parent, was supposed to allow them to walk their path.
Yeah.
While we were growing up, sometimes people thought one thing or the other, like, oh, I should try to get them out of trouble when they're in trouble or something like that. And I thought, no, they should learn their consequences, feel it, so hopefully it won't happen again. So I never just paid for their way out of any trouble that they might have gotten in. My son Wesley got in trouble quite a lot, and in school and stuff like that. And I just felt like that there's consequences to your actions. And my belief is that they should, if they're willing to do the deed, then they should be willing to face the consequences. But some people would think I was too lenient with them, and so it's like I felt like no matter what I did, that somebody was, judging me as a parent. But after going through my healing journey, I was the parent that they chose. I used the parent for them to go and walk the path that they had agreed to walk, contract they had, the things that they had agreed to experience in this lifetime. And I don't think we know if we say, okay, I'm going to experience profound loss. We don't know quite how that's going to show up because it really depends on a lot of different factors and what's present, what is available to us at any given time. We don't know how that's going to show up, and we forget what we contract to exactly when we come Earthside, because otherwise we probably try to avoid it, right?
Yeah.
Or wouldn't feel it completely, and we wouldn't feel it fully. And that is part of our soul's growth, is to feel everything, to feel the emotions, to feel what we came here to learn, in this lifetime. So
Yeah, I 100% agree. I will add to that. Again, spiritual teachings are such that we do not remember. We're not really conscious of what we came here to learn. But if we look for the lesson, if we do become, take the spiritual path and listen, it could start as a kid as a yearning. Like I was always looking at the sky as a kid, thinking there's got to be more. And it came from super dysfunction, super dysfunction. My mom tried suicide 5-6 times by that time I was 10. So I also believe that the childhood environments that we choose, and some of them could be super balanced and happy and most positive, and you don't have problems, and good for you if you got that life. I didn't. And, and it tied in completely with what would later in life at 48 years old traumatize me completely. And so now I've got this thing, you've got your stuff, and it's piling on and piling on, and piling on. And it's kind of like, what more do I have to learn? What more am I supposed to see in this? And that is what becomes very individual and unique, and why we turn to spiritual tools and teachers and healing and energy work and all of this stuff. Which never ends, Vickie. I think we were talking earlier about, the path is continually taking us whatever we have contracted to come here and take on for ourselves. And I just personally, for me, believe that it doesn't end until we transition. You might get a little break and a little rest.
a little bit of a lull,
It doesn't all have to come from tragedy. Right? And so there does come a point where, do you think, so I want to quickly, I don't want to skim over it. What was the greatest spiritual awakening that you had and write about when you're during this vigil with Crystal?
Well, Crystal, when they put her into comfort care, I came back, had that experience. And I came back to the room and I was like buzzing for hours. It took hours and hours for that feeling to go away.
Mm-hmm.
I was standing next to her bed and they were about to put her into the comfort care, which means they're just waiting. They pull everything away, all the sedation, everything, and they just wait for me to have a heart attack, for them to, for their hearts fail, whatever.
Right.
And so I'm standing next to the bed and my husband said, I can't watch her die.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Pete, you do what's right for you. And I really meant that. I said, there's no judgment. Where maybe 2 years before that, I would have been judging for that, you know? But I really felt like that I was way beyond all of those lower level emotions. And I only needed to do what you need to do yourself. He walks out the hospital room. I'm standing there with her. And 5 minutes later, he walks back into the hospital room. He said, Crystal turned me around at the stairs. He said, we don't leave people behind.
Oh, I just got chills. I remember reading that, but I'm just getting chills now. What a compassionate, it's like if there could be any more compassionate message, and and she might have even been going in and out of afterworld at that point. But even if she wasn't, how beautiful and pure, you know?
At that moment, I felt a little nerve and I was shocked because I was like, oh crap, something's about to happen here.
Yeah.
Because Pete and I were not fans of each other.
Uh-huh.
She put us in a room for 5 days straight, 147, and we got to know each other.
Mm-hmm.
We got to lay down all of our judgments, all the stories that we knew about one another, and we really got to know each other. We ate together. We took care of Crystal. We took turns sleeping. If I would leave the hospital, then the boys were there. The two oldest boys. We always had somebody there with her, and so I knew when he walked back into the room, I thought, okay, there's some healing about to take place here.
Yeah.
And so the next 5 days, she always wanted us to have a good relationship, and she knew that Pete would need me after she was gone, you know?
And after, and hearing you talk, for those of us that believe in contracts, I believe there can be like, a major one and then maybe other little sort of subcontracts. And so only you would know, only she would know what her real contract is. But because you're part of it, all the people in her life are part of it, the more intimate the relationship. So Pete will have had a contract with her, maybe her sons would have had a contract, etc. And we can only know our part in the contract. If we're lucky enough, maybe you go to a channel who can tell you, what their part was a little bit more. But ultimately, I adopted years ago that it's not for me or anybody else to judge why my daughter left the planet, because I don't believe the doors will open to that death transition unless they're meant to. I just don't believe that. And the police told me my daughter had such an angelic face when they went in, and you can't fake that. You can't fake that. And I only ever saw her in, the funeral home. And she did look beautiful. Beautiful. So who dies with a beautiful angelic face unless they're at peace in that transition? Right? I mean, we should all be so lucky, right?
The day that she passed, and she had gone through 48 days of like
hell.
There was times when her medication would be wearing off or something like that. She'd start having seizures and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the moment she took her last breath, I knew that was her last breath. And when I got up, I took a moment though, and there's something that I think everybody might want to hear, is how I soothed her off. And it was in the book. I don't know if you remember reading again. But when I got up and looked at her, before I tell you that story, her face was, it was angelic, just like you said. It was not this 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 loop that she went through a lot. She looked like she was just peacefully sleeping.
Yeah.
And she had gone through 48 days of hell. And she passed. It was just like she was lose. But knowing that she was going to be passing, and the doctor, by the way, said she'll last a couple of hours and maybe a couple of days. I said for 19 days.
Yeah, I remember reading that.
I'm like, and they're shaking their head, and I'm like, you don't know my daughter. She's spicy. She's she had work to do. She still had work that she would not complete. She was trying to like wrap everything up and tie it in a little bow. And
this was the period where you and Pete were healing together as well? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so beautiful. You write in this book, yet as I kissed her forehead, this is in your heartfelt goodbye, a serene wisdom filled me. She had crossed over into a realm where love knows no bounds, her spirit a beacon of joy and purity. And in her departure, she left behind, this is what I love, she left behind the keys to a boundless love. Whoa, teaching us that even in goodbye, there is a promise of presence, a whisper of reunion in the embrace of the infinite. I mean, beautiful, beautiful. And I don't know if those words were channeled to you as you in that moment reflecting back, being part of that divine energy. It's almost a blessing to have experienced that, Vickie.
when you think about where they are,
Yeah. Yeah.
no lower level emotions. All there is just pure essence, pure joy, pure love. That's it.
Agreed.
That's how if we can settle into that. And just because I love them more than I ever thought I did. Like you think you love your children and the matter behind it's like that love just continues to grow, and you don't have to worry about them. You don't have to, there's no judgment. There's no arguments, because I don't know about you, but I didn't have the perfect relationship with my daughter. We are times, there's times when you're your best friend, and other times when you feel like, okay, what did I do now? But where we are right now is just pure love. And although I would so give my right arm for her to be here visibly, this is what I have.
Yeah.
What I have now. There's no, she's not going to walk through that door, but I can just keep growing this love that I have for her, and just, have her understand that I know that she is here, watch over me, watch over her boys, just to be that earth angel, that she is.
Thanks for joining me with Vickie Menendez on this first part of her interview. Join us again for part 2, airing November 12th, 2025, episode 111 on the Grief Talk podcast, where Vickie talks about the loss of her 4th child, her son Jesse, and the self-love, self-care, and healing that she's been on since then.